Hello and welcome to Curious Casefiles, episode 13.
Yeah,
13, Danielle.
I know.
And yeah, I'm Lisa.
I'm Danielle.
And Jamie is missing today, you might notice. He's not feeling very well, so
Yeah.
bless him. Which means that we only found out maybe about 5 minutes ago that he really couldn't do the show. So we all picked two stories for tonight, and I'm going to have to now read Jamie's, and I don't know what it even says. So just an advanced thing that I've not read it before. Jamie wrote it for himself.
Yeah.
So if I stuff it all up, that's why.
You'll
When I'm
have
reading
to
it.
you'll have to decipher his notes.
I've got to decipher Jamie's notes, and you can imagine.
Well, it'll make for an interesting
But,
episode.
bless him, he's not feeling very well, and
No.
we wish
Yeah.
him well very soon.
Hope so.
Yeah, Jamie's over there, not feeling well. XP
Where
was
did you
asking. I'm just answering XP, Danielle.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, XP says, where did you say he was? He's in bed.
Yeah,
been
it
poorly.
just happened literally like a couple
Yeah.
minutes before we were ready to go on, and when it hits him hard. So
Yeah, he's got Crohn's disease, and it just yeah.
yeah.
So he's not doing great.
So today we're going to work on deciphering and going through some stories that lead us to wonder about angelic intervention and guardian angels and spirit guides and things like that. And
Yeah, we were
hopefully,
going to call the episode "Guardian Angels," but as we looked into it, there's a lot confusion really over the difference between a guardian angel and a spirit guide. We're going to explain that to you first. I would like to say though that the research on this was very bloody difficult. This is a subject I've looked into before, and there was stories everywhere.
yeah.
Trying to find them now in 2023, it's not bloody easy. I don't know why they've been removed from the internet, but they're not there.
Yeah, and that goes for, like articles and things like that. I mean, you used to be able to readily find these things, and yeah, they've hid them quite well. Even when you go further down into the search engines on pages 3, 4, it's just very difficult. So we're going to do our best. We found some very good examples and stories that people have shared, and I'm interested in hearing maybe if anybody in our audience might even have gone through any kind of angelic intervention or what they think might have helped them.
Yeah. So before we get into the stories that we've all found two each. We're going to just talk a little bit about what a guardian angel is compared to what a spirit guide is, and Danielle's going to kick off and talk about guardian angels. So Danielle Elvis.
Yeah, we're gonna go through that and tell you what we found, and up to you to make up your mind and how you've interpreted it. But from what we've been able to discover, according to Christianity, everyone has angels protecting them from the moment that they're born. Contrary to what many believe, no specific angels given guardianship to each human, though. So hence the term guardian angel, where you get that. However, biblically speaking, there are angels who guide and sometimes intervene to help when needed. The idea of entities or angels, spirits that follow and protect every human isn't unique to Christianity. However, it can be traced back throughout history, what we now call even mythology, and into other modern day religions that they talk about such things. So in the Old Testament, we're told that God is surrounded by a court of heavenly figures who worship him, and they perform deeds in his name. Outside of the Bible, in ancient texts, it's frequently referenced that supernatural beings or angels are sent by God or the gods to protect individuals, groups, or humanity as a whole, or as messengers. Traditionally, followers of Catholicism believe that guardian angels are assigned when a child is baptized. So if any of you are, Catholic or were raised that way, you may have, learned that as well. They believe that one of these beings is chosen to stand at his or her side until the time of death, or even perhaps beyond, maybe even helping transition to heaven, that kind of thing. However, this is, I'm sorry. Oh,
I know what you
I heard
mean.
an echo. I heard an echo.
Oh, it was me.
However, okay. However, this is really, it's a speculation and not a true teaching of the church. Even you can even go to the Catholic websites and they can go into it more with you. But the common
Yeah,
opinion
we
among
couldn't find anything in scripture that actually said that there's an angel with you from the time of your baptism. We couldn't find it.
right specifically, but the common opinion among Catholic theologians is that all people have guardian angels that are assigned at birth. But this,
Kind of strange that the theologians think it's assigned at birth, but a lot of the followers believe it's assigned at baptism. I don't know where they got that.
yeah, well, you can find it in the writings of Saint Basil, Saint Jerome, and also Saint Thomas Aquinas kind of followed into that belief as well. So in Matthew 18, when we're talking biblically, Matthew 18:10, Jesus states, "See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always behold the face of my Father who is in heaven." He said this before the crucifixion, and he was particularly speaking about the Jewish children. It would therefore seem that non-Christian, not just Christian children had guardian angels.
So every child, regardless of their...
And Jesus says their angels always behold the face of his Father. This isn't merely a declaration that they continually stand in the presence of God, but an affirmation that they have continual access to him. So if a child is in trouble, they can serve as the child's advocate before God.
Like a go-between sort of thing.
Yeah. And then just, quickly too, referenced in the Bible, for instance, in Daniel 6, we hear, or Daniel tells of the king that put him, confined him, and God sent his angels to shut the lion's mouth so that he was not harmed. So he had protection from these angels, or an angel. And then 2 Kings, the king of Syria, he sent an army of horses and chariots to surround Elisha. But Elisha was given protection with with this invisible army, but nobody else could see him but him. He was able to see this. He had a young servant with him, and the young servant saw the king's, army around him and was like, "What are we going to do? How do we fight this?" And Elisha told him that God's army was bigger. So Elisha prayed to God at that moment, asking him to open the young servant's eyes so that he could see the protectors as well. And the Lord did this. And when he opened his eyes, he saw a mountain full of horses and chariots of fire all around them to protect them. So we do have evidence where the Bible does tell us that we have this protection. So these angels are there to guide us on a pathway to heaven and through this earthly realm. They can't oblige anyone to do so, nor decide for an individual, because we all have free will. Well, the angels have free will too, but they're just there to guide us, advise or suggest the correct path to follow. Whether or not the person follows it is up to the individual. And the word angel comes from the Greek translation for the Hebrew word for messenger. The Greeks translated this as angelos, but it was originally written as messenger, a messenger of God. The Bible mentions that angels, or these messengers, mentions the word 273 times, I believe is what we found.
That's a lot, isn't it?
That's a lot, yeah. And we're told that there's a vast number of angels, not necessarily like a specific number, but it's estimated to be in the thousands.
That could be more though, because like everything biblically is in the thousands. That was just what they thought of as like a massive number when
they didn't
like,
have. Yeah, they didn't have
like
the words. They didn't have the words to say
millions.
Right. So we're not given an actual number. Specifically, though, the book of Revelation tells us not to worship angels and that they are God's messengers, but they are not God's, and not to be confused by this. So, for instance, Revelation.
Idol, wouldn't it?
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely. You don't want to worship anybody but God. I mean, it's fine to call on these angels for help and things like that, or to call on God to send these angels, but the Bible tells you, biblically speaking, you're not to worship them. So Revelation 19:10 says, "And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, See thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant and of thy brethren. and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And so that references in the Bible to these angels or messengers guiding mankind. And we have, I believe you had some examples to share.
Just prior to that, XPLidocious has said in the comments, some people say your guardian angels are your family members who have passed away.
Yeah,
We're
we'll
going to
talk
get
about
into that. We'll get into that just shortly. It was very difficult to try and decipher this, so we've done the best that we can. We're going to try and explain what we interpret for what we've researched. The family members have passed away compared to the guardian angels. So we'll get to that.
Yeah.
And before I put these on the screen, I'd just like to that these are just one translation. You've obviously got your different versions of scripture. You've got like your NIV version. Yeah. So this is just one translation. There might be slight word differences depending on what version of the Bible you have, but this is the basic gist.
Yeah, people have their favorites or what they can, sounds easier for them to read with the these and the thous. But here we have Hebrews 1:14. Are not all angel spirits in the divine service sent to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation?
Yeah, that's basically like going to heaven, isn't it? Inherit salvation.
Inherit salvation,
yeah.
And this one's kind of one of my favorites, actually. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some people have entertained angels without knowing it. That's Hebrews 13:12. I'm sorry,
and that's something that's trying to play with a couple of the stories we've got as well.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, everybody.
Yeah, I'm spoiling it. Don't spoil it. No disaster can overtake you. No plague can come near your tent. He has given his angels orders about you to guard you wherever you go. And that's Psalm 91:10-11. And then we've got Exodus 23:20. I will send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared.
And again, that would be heaven, I imagine.
Yeah. And then we have one more, I believe, out of Job 33:22-24. His soul draws near the pit and his life to those who bring death. If there be for him an angel, a mediator, one of the 1,000, to declare to man what is right for him, and he is merciful to him and says, deliver him from going down into the pit. I have found a ransom or an atonement.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the history.
Like, as we said, there's like hundreds of mentions. So this is just a couple of examples.
Yep.
That appear to like be more about the guardianship of the angels and how they're there to like give messages or protect or lead or guide humanity.
Yeah.
So yeah, and before we get onto the stories, we're now going to look at what we've termed what is a spirit guide, because there's a difference. There, and we'll explain that in a minute. Right. So long before the spread of religions like Christianity and Islam, ancient peoples all across the world believed in some cultures, and they continue to believe to this day, eternal spirits of their ancestors. These ancestors are thought as some kind of living dead spirits who continue to show an interest in the daily lives of their living descendants. These ancestral spirit guides may include deceased parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, uncles, aunts, anybody really, a relative or somebody that's in that family line. It is believed that because they have crossed over to the other side of life, that the spirit guides act as mediators between the living and the Almighty God. This way of life is regarded as ancestor reverence, communication or remembering, and not as ancestor worship per se. These spirit guides can take on many forms, human, animal, and nature spirits being the most common, but even in some cultures they'll take on the appearance of elves and fairies. Some are even seen as pure energy and light beings, and some as ghost-like entities. Many mediums claim to communicate with their spirit guides to give messages to the loved ones of those who have passed on from the spiritual realm. Now, your opinion of mediums might be a bit like, a bit dodgy, but that's what they claim, that they're communicating with their spirit guides.
Right. And we're not claiming to believe necessarily in that either. We're just bringing it forward as to where spirit guides come into many historical incidents.
Yeah. So many people confuse the terminology of spirit guide and guardian angel, and even after having an experience, they'll call that experience a guardian angel who
Yeah.
appeared as a deceased loved one. That's not a guardian angel, that's typically a spirit guide, because humans do not become angels. It may in fact be that the guardian angel perhaps did choose to present itself, because they can choose any form possible, as somebody that would be comforting to the individual to assist them, because obviously angels have not got any human form, but they can appear as whatever. But there is instances where maybe a child has saw a great grandparent that they had never seen before, and then they've recognised that as being a great grandparent from pictures afterwards. So that's not going to be a comfort to them if it's somebody they've never seen before, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's you and you know that that's your grandparent, it's going to be a comfort to you. But there is a lot of cases where it was found out afterwards that it was an ancestor. So it wouldn't be comforting to the individual because they didn't know who that person was at the time of the experience. Whatever the case, though, both guardian angels and spirit guides have been acknowledged separately in different cultures around the world from time immemorial, and both seem to have an interest in guiding humanity to its full potential and offering a helping hand along the way when necessary. These beings do share similarities, and this may blur the line between one and the other, but the marked difference is that angels have never been human. They were created as God's messengers, and spirit guides are the souls of humans who once lived and obviously have passed on. And they're presumed, this is not anything based in fact, this is just from the research, they're presumed to have attained a high enough level in their spiritual journey to be able to offer wisdom and guidance to their descendants. So that's the difference. So you have got instances where both of them, and there's a confusion and a blurred line, but angels, the main difference is that angels are a completely different race of being, a completely different, they've never been human.
Right. Well, angels, man was created in the image of God. Angels were not. And angels, like you mentioned, angels, they were never human, but they can present in different forms, just like we saw in Hebrews. You don't know if you're entertaining man or angel at times. So,
so the term spirit guide in itself is often associated with being a new age term, and it probably conjures up with some people visions of tarot cards and psychics and
clairvoyance.
All things like that. Clairvoyance. But these beings and entities have roots in many different cultures, from Africa to Native America to like Australia, the Aboriginals, and way beyond. They've been around for a very long time, and it's not just something that is, I mean, it's been adopted by the New Age movement, if that's what you want to call it. But these beings have been acknowledged throughout history. The spirits of deceased loved ones have always been believed to remain present in our lives as a comfort or a guide through tough periods. Whether or not these spirit guides are actually assisting the angels is unknown. I mean, it could be that they're working together.
Right.
We don't know. But there are many accounts of people who have had experiences that they're terming as angelic, but they describe it as being that of a deceased loved one. Many people believe that their loved ones become angels when they pass on. Like you have maybe heard people saying, oh, they've got their wings or whatever. But in Matthew 22, we are told that Jesus said, at the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels. This indicates that they become like the angels, but do not literally become an angel, because obviously, as we said before, they're two completely different beings. The actual idea that a human can gain wings in heaven is something that's a purely Hollywood invention. Like in the much-loved Christmas movie, I'm sure we've all seen it, It's a Wonderful Life. Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. And we're told that Clarence, a human who has passed on, can gain his angel wings by assisting humans on Earth. Now, that's a lovely story. It's a heartwarming story, and it's a movie that everybody probably loves and watches every Christmas, but it's got no foundation in Scripture. That's just something that is a more, I mean, you can call it recent phenomenon that's been put into place in Hollywood, that a human can become an angel, but in Scripture, that can't happen.
Well, I think we talked to, a lot of times when when we have our loved ones pass away too, it's like we say we now have an angel in heaven looking over us and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It becomes traditional to think of it that way.
Yeah. And also another thing that we like, completely irrelevant to guardian angels. When I was looking for images of angels, every single image is female.
Outside of the archangels, I think you're right. The archangels, because they're like the more warring angels.
They're always depicted as females, but when you look at the actual scripture, they're always described as masculine.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear in the Bible, I could find anyway, if you know any different to me, I don't know, that there's actually any female angels. They all appear to be masculine, but they're always depicted as feminine, which I found was weird. Just side note, weird.
Interesting to say the least, but you're right.
Yeah. So I'm now going to try and tell Jamie's first story. So,
all right.
You excuse me, I'm going to try and read Jamie's notes. He's given it a title. It's called An Angel's Calling. That's a title.
Okay.
So, yeah. Does that give any spoilers? I have no idea. Let's find out. Right. And, I need to get his pictures that he gave me as well. And he's not here to tell me when to put them on the screen, so I'm going to have to guess. Right. The Spanish Fort Police Department in Utah were called to a car accident late on the night of Friday the 13th of November 2015.
Friday the 13th.
Not a very good day to get in a car. I wouldn't. Yeah, so Friday the 13th of November 2015, a vehicle was overturned in an icy Utah river. 4 of the officers rushed over to the vehicle. They heard a female voice screaming out for help inside, like, help me, help us, help me. Due to hearing the call, the 4 officers did not hesitate in trying to gain access to this vehicle. Their first job was to get it upright and out of the water. Now, that's not in order, but apparently a fisherman had been the one that discovered the vehicle and called the authorities.
Okay.
As they were manually flipping the car over, they continued to hear cries for help from inside. As they were struggling to get to the occupant, which was a female occupant in the vehicle, they could still hear the voice calling out to them. It was then that they realised that there was a baby in the car, in the back. They hadn't seen the baby. The baby was unconscious, hanging upside down in its baby seat. So, oh my God, there's a little baby. They discover then that the mother, it's the mother that's in the driver's seat, has passed away, unfortunately. She's no longer with us, and she'd been passed away for some time. However, they got 4 firefighters, I believe, and 2 police officers all heard a woman shouting for help from inside that car.
Oh, wow.
It turns out that she had left her parents' house the evening before and to drive home, and obviously she'd never made it home. Nobody knew until this fisherman found the car the next morning. So for 14 hours, that baby had been hanging upside down from its seat.
14 hours?
14 hours with its head partially in the icy water. Now, to give you an indication of how cold it was in this water, 3 of the emergency workers had to be hospitalised for hypothermia from the little time that they spent in the water doing the rescue. So they got hypothermia.
Oh, wow.
The baby was unconscious. Obviously, you got the baby out. The baby went to hospital and made a full recovery, and she's fine. But there was a voice in that car, and everybody on the scene heard it. But the mother had obviously, it appears that she passed away on impact. But somebody guided them to help us, and get that baby out of that car. And that baby survived in the freezing cold temperatures overnight, hanging upside down in a baby seat with its head just touching the icy cold water. So, I mean, obviously, all the heat comes out through your head. Yeah. And the baby lived. And
that is a miracle. That is definitely a miracle. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I think I've covered everything.
You had a couple pictures. There's a couple pictures, I think, of the mother and the baby before the accident.
So that was the mother and baby Lily. The baby was called Lily, and she was called Lynn Grosbeck, and baby Lily. And I don't know how many pictures he put in there, so let me just check. Sorry about this. I've got 5 minutes notice. Yeah, we've got another couple of pictures of miracle baby Lily who survived, and she's now doing well with her father. And a couple of pictures of the vehicle, so you can see the damage to the vehicle. This was upside down, obviously. This is after they flipped it over. Quite a lot of damage.
Yeah, that was definitely, that's definitely angelic intervention right there. I mean, there's 14 hours.
They all swear that they heard this woman's voice, but there was nobody there. And just another image of the vehicle and a couple of newspaper articles. Rescuers' mysterious voice led to finding miracle baby 14 hours after horrific crash. Is this baby proof that angels do exist? Lily was trapped in the car after a crash that killed her mother, but was saved from icy river when cops heard the mysterious voice calling. This was all over the media at the time, and they swear that there was a woman from inside that car. Help me, help us, save us.
Right. Well, they heard it, calling over.
Mm-hmm.
That is a miracle, definitely.
Yeah, it could have been the spirit of the mother. There is people that believe it was a guardian angel. There is people who believe it was the spirit of the mother trying to save her child.
What year was this? Did we?
That was in 2015.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it could be a spirit guide, the mother coming back to save her baby. It could be angelic, who knows? But miraculous, and even more so that the baby survived, hanging upside down from its car seat for 14 hours. Amazing.
That is amazing.
She definitely had somebody watching over her, whether it be mum or a divine being, who knows, but amazing.
Well, I guess we're going to follow along with that theme, since we're talking about vehicles, right? And I was able to find a story about a highway rescue. I think Highway to Heaven was kind of the perfect name for this particular incident, if you want to call it, or miracle. But in 2011, on Highway 6 in Crawford, Texas, it had been a really rainy day, gray, rainy, stormy day, and a woman named Lisa Bodwin was driving home from work. And at some point, it doesn't say why, or she never said why, but at some point she lost control of her SUV with a slick rain, and she started veering into oncoming traffic. Her vehicle ended up crashing into a car, and that car was driven by a man named Anthony Russo. And that would be Lisa Bodwin, yeah. There was nobody else in the car with either of them. They were driving by themselves. But Anthony recalled he could describe seeing Lisa's car coming towards his vehicle, and then part of it like through the windshield, and then he blacked out. He didn't remember, he didn't remember anything for a few minutes after that. Lisa's car actually flipped several times after the collision and ultimately crushed Anthony Russo's car. And at this point, both drivers were trapped inside their vehicles, and both of them were turned upside down, I believe. Definitely Lisa's there. And Lisa remained conscious, however, and obviously being very scared, she remembered crying out, "God, please help me." Both vehicles started to catch fire, becoming engulfed in smoke and flames. And Lisa remembered, even, and to this day can remember, feeling her feet were on fire. She could feel the burn.
That's horrific.
She was trapped in her seatbelt too. So, I mean, sometimes, that you wonder about these seatbelt issues, and they tell you to carry a tool now, but when you're in this situation and you're upside down, so she's trapped in her seatbelt while this SUV is flipped upside down. And in the meantime, there were a few people, obviously witnesses or passerbys, that stopped. One of them was a couple named Cody and Sherry Clemens, and they approached Lisa's vehicle first. Cody, as you see on the screen there, he tried to reach into the car to help Lisa. He could only get so far in there because of it being so crushed. And he realized that she was strapped in her seatbelt. So he had a knife on him, a pocket knife or something. He was able to pass that to her, and she cut herself loose. But right at that moment, Cody and Lisa both noticed that there was no way that she was getting out by herself. The reason being, the SUV being upside down and the top being crushed, there was only a small opening that was no more than 7 or 8 inches high. So there was no way that she was going to get through there without like a jaws of life. And the paramedics, nobody had arrived at this time yet. So Cody, he reached in and was holding her hands, trying to comfort her and trying to pull her a little bit away because her feet, were on fire.
Trying to brave given that the car's on fire for him to do that.
He had said that he prayed upon reaching this scene that, God help me. I don't want to be a victim of this accident either. Help me to be strong and courageous and help this woman and this man to get through this. Yeah. So there was some divine protection in that prayer, I would imagine there. So as he was grabbing onto her hands, both he and Lisa Bodwin noticed there was another set of hands upon theirs. They described it as a bright white hand, or two bright white hands. And she felt the hands like pulling hers. And then there was this burst of white.
Just the hands. There was nothing attached to the hands.
No, just these long stretched bright white hands. And then there was a burst of bright light. And at the moment of that burst of light, Lisa was outside of the vehicle, and both she and Cody were laying on the grass away from the vehicle next to where Cody's wife, Sherry, was standing.
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that. And again, you saw the picture. There was no way she was going to get through that. So in the meantime, Anthony's car was being consumed by flames as well. And ultimately, there was an explosion. So when Sherry, Cody's wife, saw this, she immediately called out, God, send your angels now. As all she could think was say, help us, help him. And there happened to be another witness who had stopped also. And she has her account of what she saw in a video clip that I've included. And she had called out, God, help this man. You've got to help this man.
Is that the Ivy video?
No.
Teresa Surley?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're upside down. Had them back to front. Anyway, here it is.
At that moment, another eyewitness saw a second miracle unfold.
I was just crying out, God, you've got to help this man. You've got to help this man. And he seemed to just emerge through the door, and he just kind of floated out on the ground. So I believe that God sent supernatural angels here to help him get out of that vehicle.
Yep. So he just...
So she actually saw him float out the door?
Yeah, and she wasn't the only one.
Did this other woman, the wife that's husband was holding...
Sherry.
What did she see when they just suddenly appeared on the grass? Did she see the light? Or
she saw the burst of light too. So almost like, I guess maybe, how a magician, when they, have the smoke and then all of a sudden you see something else. That's kind of how they described it. There was like this burst of light. And the next thing they knew, Lisa and Cody were away from the vehicle on the grass. And right after this explosion, and Teresa saw this as well, Sherry and Cody saw this, Anthony appeared to just be floating out of the vehicle, and he recalled being pinned because the steering wheel was up into his chest even.
So you've got multiple witnesses that prior to this didn't know each other, did
not know each other.
They're all seeing similar things.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So obviously, Anthony was unconscious at that particular moment, but later he said that he had no doubts whatsoever that God sent the angels to intervene and rescue him from that. This all had taken place before the firefighters even arrived. When they did arrive, they noticed Lisa, Anthony, Cody, and Sherry all in one area together outside of the inflamed vehicles and laying on the grass. So immediately they were taken to the hospital, where both of them had severe burns, especially Lisa on her feet and her lower legs. Yeah. And Anthony recalled feeling burns when he was first conscious on his arm, but then he felt no pain at all, which I guess is a
common theme as well, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and they both had other serious injuries, including broken bones. And, thank God, and through the help of God and these angels, they both survived. But It did take months of rehab. For instance, Lisa had 8 months of rehab. Her burns were healed completely. She didn't even have any complications. We're needing like a skin graft or anything like that for her burns. Anthony, his rehab took a little bit longer because of he had lost the ability to walk through broken bones and things like that. So he worked really hard his first year and a half following the accident. And he had to use a walker, and then went from a walker to crutches, and then was eventually able to get around using just a cane. But he felt pretty confident he was going to be able to ditch that cane eventually too. But just to top this story off and match it with the Bible a bit more, another interesting thing that happened moments after the accident. If you recall, I said it was a really dreary, rainy day. And Sherry Clemens noticed that everyone's eyes seemed to be like drawn up to the sky. So she's looking up too. And they all noticed this incredible rainbow that she said was just like encompassing the entire scene. Wow. Now, rainbows are not uncommon after rainstorms and things like that. But it just, for these people who obviously...
What else they just witnessed as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It stuck out with them.
Oh, that's wow. There's just no explanation for that.
No. Pretty remarkable.
Wow. Definitely something supernatural.
Well, when you're talking about these bright lights, bursts of light, and being beamed out of a vehicle that there was no other possible way to have gotten out of before the paramedics even got there with the jaws of life. Now, I know you at first when I mentioned this, you weren't sure what that was in the UK, but I think I explained.
Like jack thing opens that stretches.
Yeah. It pries it open or rips them. It's what you need.
Yeah. So yeah, that's amazing.
Pretty amazing. Yeah.
And wow. I'm just, yeah.
It blows your mind. I know.
There's no words. So just these people were completely unrelated, and they all witnessed exactly the same thing, and all backing each other's story up.
Mm-hmm. They met a couple years afterwards. They met a couple years after that took place, and they got together for a visit, and they just all recounted how they had not known each other, and they just happened upon this accident and all witnessed this same thing.
All I can say is they must have been meant for greater things, and they weren't done.
Absolutely.
That takes us on to our next story, which I can probably read better because it's mine. And I've called this one Child of Light. And this one is miraculous as well. So this is 1986. In October of 1986, a woman called Rhonda Skidmore stopped off at her son's elementary school to drop some clothing off for him. She left her two daughters, Heather and Sarah, both two. Heather had just turned 2. Sarah was a couple of days off her 3rd birthday. And 5-year-old boy she was babysitting in the car while she quickly ran into the reception. She was going to be gone for a couple of minutes. That was it. And it was 1986, so completely different time. You wouldn't expect anything was going to happen, but unfortunately it did. When she returned to the car, her world fell apart when the 5-year-old boy that she was babysitting informed her that a bearded man had come up to the car and asked little Sarah to go with him. Obviously, little Sarah, being told don't talk to strangers, etc., so she refused to go with him. And he then pulled her through the window of the car and sped off in his car with little Sarah in tow. Obviously, the police were then called, and a 3-day search ensued with police officers, FBI agents, and multiple volunteers from the area looking for this abducted child, a little 2-year-old girl. As each hour and then each day passed, the hopes of the searchers diminished. This was in Arizona, and the climate in Arizona is quite a cruel one. You've got scorching heat throughout the day, and then the extremes from one to the other. At night, you've got freezing temperatures. So by day 3, officials were sure that they were now looking for the remains of this little girl. However, and I've got the article to show you what happened next. Hunters found a missing 3-year-old girl wandering in the ... It was actually desert, but when I screenshotted it, it said ... When I read it, it said desert, but anyway.
Okay.
In Mesa, Arizona, hunters found a missing 3-year-old girl wandering in the desert Friday, 3 days after a bearded man snatched her from her mother's car, parked outside a Mesa school with 2 other young children in it. She just wandered out the desert towards the hunters, and he picked her up. And she was taken to hospital. She ended up being fine. The parents then done a news conference. Obviously, this was all over the media at the time. And one of the things they said during this initial news conference, like, because the media want to know, is there anything known about the person that abducted her? Has she said anything? And they said at the time, the only thing that she said is that her little sister was there. And obviously that didn't make any sense, because her little sister wasn't there. Little Heather, who was left in the car with a 5-year-old boy, she wasn't there. And they didn't actually ever find the kidnapper, but that's completely irrelevant to what happens next. So, little girl, she's fine. She gets out of hospital. She goes back to her parents. Life goes on as normal. About 2 years later, the mother of the little girl has another baby.
Okay.
More time passes. That little baby grows up into a toddler. She's now 2 or 3 years old. And it's then, about 5 years later, that little Sarah, who was the one that was kidnapped, realizes that this sister that hadn't been born yet was the little girl that she had seen in the desert. And she describes this in detail. When she was in the desert, she was walking one way, and this little girl, with a glow round her and blonde hair and blue-green eyes, appeared. She looked a little bit like Heather, but it wasn't Heather. And she made her turn around and guided her towards the hunters.
Wow. So her sister wasn't even born yet.
It wasn't until the new sister was 2 years old that she realised, obviously, as she transitioned from being a newborn baby into a 2-year-old, her appearance changed, obviously. She's like, oh my God, it was her. It was the unborn sister that guided her out of the desert.
And even if it, I mean, she obviously said that looks like my sister, but, even if it wasn't necessarily her sister, to me, this is just an example of how God could use angels, because you didn't want the little girl to be scared. So having another child help guide her out would be less threatening to her as a child herself.
It's very strange that it's like the unborn sister.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And this was reported in the Arizona Republic in 1995. So a few years later, obviously, by the time she's discovered, her sister's grown up a little bit, and she's like, well, wait a minute. Yeah. No, you were in the desert. What?
Yeah. Wow.
There is a whole thing that, like, babies are actually waiting to be born, isn't they?
Yeah, there's actually...
I'm not very good at describing that. Danielle, describe it better for me.
Well, I mean, I'm no expert on it, right? But it seems to me there was a part in the Bible that talked a little bit about, being in heaven before you're born, but I relate it more to what we most do is the TV, right? So I just always remember there's an old Shirley Temple movie. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It was Blue something. Someone help me out. No anyway, it was like a dream sequence, and Shirley Temple and her little brother were on this adventure, and their pets, their cat and dog, turned into people in this adventure. But there was one scene in this movie where they go and they're in this, what appears to be heaven, and all these children are sitting around in these white garments and just laughing and playing. And then this boat comes up, and it's like these children are getting ready to come to Earth to be born. So like their souls are up there waiting to be born and that kind of thing. But they're all young children themselves. So obviously it's not based on anything factual, but that's just what it made me think of, Yeah,
and we got like Felix in the comments says, so this time it was a relative that hadn't passed on, but before they existed. And I think it highlights how little we do know about. We actually know nothing. There is like...
No. I mean, we don't.
All we know is that it's amazing, and miracles are happening every day. And it's just, wow. Yeah. That little girl was obviously meant to survive.
And like Kelly says here, David talks about God knitting him together in the womb and knowing every day of his life before one came to pass. So, I mean, it's miraculous. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. And now I've got to do Jamie's other story. So again, I do know more about this one now because I watched one of the videos he was watching. So,
okay.
This one is, I'll tell you exactly why Jamie picked it, because it's about Christmas and he's a massive Christmas baby. He loves Christmas, so he picked it because it's about Christmas. Right, where are we?
34.
I'm just trying to find the beginning. There we go. Right.
Oh, that's right. You got his notes.
Yeah. When Jimmy Vasquez met his future wife, Anna, he didn't hesitate in letting her know that he was eager to have children of his own. It was something that he'd always imagined he was going to be a father. So when he met Anna, they had an instant connection, and he told her almost immediately that he wanted to have children. Soon they got married, and not long into the marriage, she decided, yeah, it's time to start a family. And in 1993, Alicia became pregnant. Now, she had diabetes, and due to her medical issues, there were complications, and she became quite ill and developed something called toxemia. I think that's how you say it, toxemia.
Yeah.
So due to these issues, an emergency C-section had to be performed. So that happened, and the little child, who they called Jimmy Jr., came into the world. He was slightly premature. As the new parents were just getting accustomed to their new child, the doctor had to interrupt this special moment with some kind of distressing news. When you're a new parent, they told him that Jimmy Jr. had a slight heart murmur, but insisted it was nothing to concern themselves about. But obviously, you want this perfect little baby.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a worry in the back of their minds, but the doctor's saying it's nothing to really concern yourself about. It'll either heal on its own. It's something that it can be quite common, or a simple procedure will sort it out.
Okay.
So they took him home, but then he started to get quite sickly, and he would pick up a lot of infections, especially upper respiratory infections, etc. And he just kept getting ill. And it wasn't long until they were referred to the Cook Children's Medical Center in Fort Worth, Texas. And I do believe that's one of the pictures that he sent me. There. So that's the Cook Children's Medical Center.
Okay.
You have to excuse me with the delays because I'm doing both things and I'm not supposed to be, but yeah. Right. So they're at this place, and I've lost my place on his document.
You're doing a fine job.
Right, so that's where they met the pediatric care specialist, a Dr. Hudson Allender. And at this point, Jimmy Jr. was 6 months old. He done all sorts of tests on little Jimmy, done EKGs. Is it EKGs or ECGs?
EKGs.
Yeah, EKGs.
Echocardiograms.
Yeah, he told the parents that it would take a week to get the results, to go home, and he would get in touch with them when he got the results and let them know. So they go home. A week later, the phone rings. Alicia picks up the phone, and it's a doctor, and he's got some bad news for her. Not only has he got quite a severe heart murmur, he's got a hole in his heart, and he's going to require open heart surgery. And obviously, they're devastated. They're terrified, and he needs to go to hospital sooner rather than later to get sorted. Little 6-month-old baby. So he goes into hospital, and they start making preparations. And the doctor basically tells him he needs to have this surgery because there was something wrong with one of the valves in his heart. As well, because of the hole in his heart. And if he didn't have the surgery, his heart could literally, basically, akin to just his heart exploding. It needed to be done. And there was a 50-50 chance that little Jimmy was going to survive this procedure. And obviously, as new parents, or any parents, that would be devastating, terrifying, frightening. Now, this was coming up for Christmas, and it was going to be little Jimmy Jr.'s first Christmas. And as a brand new family with a new baby, they were excited. They'd long planned for this baby. They were looking forward to his first Christmas. And now they were thinking, is he going to be here for his first Christmas? He was scheduled in for surgery the next day. So they went to the reception and made a request to take him out of the hospital for a couple of hours to spend some family time. And also, Alicia really wanted to get a photograph of little Jimmy with Santa, just in case the worst happened. She wanted him to meet Santa. She wanted him to have his Christmas experience. They got in touch with the main doctors, and they agreed. But they wanted him back by a certain time because they had to make preparations for the surgery, which was going to be first thing the next morning. So they take him, they put him in the car, and they start driving. And they come to like a mall, stop the car, decide to go in, find a Santa, get a photo. They go in. There's a massive queue, as there is. It's coming up for Christmas time. There's a massive queue, so they queue up with little Jimmy, and they wait to see Santa Claus. As they're in the queue, Santa Claus gestures to the couple, like, and they're like, "Is he talking to us?" Like, "Oh, yeah." And he does it again, and they're like, "Should we go forward? Are people going to be pissed off? These people are all in the queue. They're waiting for Santa. They've got their kids. Their kids are all getting agitated. They're impatient, and he's telling us to come forward." But Santa's like, so they go forward, and he says, "Can I hold him?" I'm like, "Yeah." So Santa takes the baby, and then he puts his head down, and he says, "You're going to have a strong heart for Christmas." And the parents look at each other like, when did you ever, like, thinking, when did you talk to Santa? Because how does he know? But none of them had talked to Santa. And they're just, like, really baffled and bewildered. And then Santa says to them, "Do you want to take a picture with me? Because you need to get back to the hospital." And the father says, "How do you know?" And he said, "Santa knows everything." And the mother said that he had like a glint in his eye. So they took the picture of the little boy, and I've got a couple of pictures that I've completely missed. I might put them up in order. I'll just go through the pictures before I tell you what happens next. So here they are when they got married. Here they are when he was born. I should have put that on when he was born, but I'm trying to do multiple things today.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine. Oh.
There's little Jimmy with a Viking hat on, which is bloody adorable, I'm just going to say. And that was a hospital.
Yeah.
There's a picture of him that was taken with Santa Claus. So there he is on Santa's knee. Bear that in mind, because something's going to happen. So they go back to the hospital. They've got their picture. They're still like, that was weird, wasn't it? That was, yeah. How did he know? Weird. But
that's not the typical.
A lot of other things on their mind. They take the little boy back. He gets prepared for surgery. He goes down, and then they've got the process of waiting hours while he gets this very complicated, quite dangerous surgery. And hours later, the doctor comes back out, and he says, "It didn't go as expected." And they're like, "Oh no, oh no." He said, "It actually went a lot better than expected. He's doing fine. He's doing fine." So they go to see him, and miraculously, within 3 days of this open heart surgery, he was fine, and he got released for the hospital. So on their way home, they decide, "Well, let's go and tell Santa." Like he seen him, and he was invested in Jimmy and whatever. Let's go to the mall and thank him for like allowing us to skip the queue and like take the photograph and let him know that he's okay. So they drive to the mall and they park up, go in, and come up to where Santa is. But it's a different Santa. So like, got a different Santa today. So they get one of the Santa's little helper women. I don't know. What do you, Santa's little helper? I don't know.
Santa's helper, elf, whatever.
Like, "Where's the Santa that was here the other day?" And they're like, "Well, he's there." "No, it's like, no, this is the only Santa we've got." And she's like, "No, it's not, because I took a picture of my baby with him the other day, and that wasn't him." She's like, "No, it's like, I'll get the manager. I'll just check. I'll get the manager." So she gets the manager, and he's like, "No, this is the only Santa we've got." It was a completely different bloke.
Wow. So that picture that you just showed,
that was
that could have been like an angel.
That could have been an angel Santa. Let's just put it back.
Wow.
It's an angel Santa. That was not the Santa that worked at the mall, though.
That's amazing.
And the first
so there was no other Santa that worked there, they said.
That was it.
Wow. That is another example, isn't it?
Yes, Felix, Santa's little helper woman. That was the best description I had. Santa's little helper woman.
Yeah.
What do you call it? Yeah, she's an elf. She might have been dressed in. I have no idea. She might have had an elf costume on. It didn't say. So I'm just
Lisa
assuming.
comes up with some amazing terms.
She's got an elf costume on, and she's going, "Santa, I know him." Yeah.
Wow.
But that, yeah, creepy, kind of creepy. Like, I mean, they had that whole experience, and at some point, the Santa that should have been there was replaced with this angel. I mean, what? Wow, creepy.
Yeah, very.
Creepy, but amazing. And the little boy's fine. He's doing well. He's not had any further complications, and doing fine.
That's awesome. That is a good feel-good story.
It is. And Jenny
But-
picked it, obviously, because it's Christmas.
Well,
A little Christmas miracle for you, everybody.
so my next story actually has to do with the verse that we brought up earlier that I said like was one of my favorites, is Hebrew 13:2. And do not forget to entertain strangers unwittingly.
Is Danielle frozen, or have I? There she is.
Am I back? Am I back?
I don't know if it was me that froze or if you froze on the screen, but I couldn't hear a word.
I don't know. So I based this on, well, not based it, but it reminded me of Hebrews 13:2. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some have unwittingly entertained angels. This is kind of a little twist on that, but I was froze. Sorry. I don't know. I don't have the best internet down here. Sorry. Anyway, this story takes place in 1969. And there's a 25-year-old woman, Ivy Olson, who is a single mother of two boys. She's newly single. She was going through a bad divorce, and she ended up moving into a 1-bedroom apartment with them. And what they described as modest, but I would probably consider, low income housing kind of thing.
Squeezing them all into 1 bedroom. It's obviously all she could afford, yeah.
Right. So she had very little money to pay the bills. Obviously, money's tight, and feed her boys. And she worked at a doctor's office, but it still wasn't enough to make her be able to save any money or even be comfortable, quite honestly. They were living paycheck to paycheck, and then beneath
I think we
that,
could all relate at this point in time with the cost of living.
Yeah. I don't know. This is in 1969, but
I know. Yeah.
So shortly after moving in, the holiday season rolled around, and she knew that Thanksgiving was going to be really difficult and depressing for her and the boys. And on top of that, she woke up that morning of Thanksgiving and realized Thanksgiving Day, we haven't been invited anywhere for dinner with a family or friends or anything. So it's, you're like, oh man, this poor woman and her kids are in there. And to top it off, she remembered only having 3 hot dogs and buns in her refrigerator to feed them that day.
Oh, no.
So,
bless her.
I know. So doing what a good mom would do, she tried to make the best of it. She said, you know what? We're going to go to the park. It was a nice day. Let's go to the park. And they barbecued the hot dogs while they were at the park, played ball, ran around, that kind of thing. And she wanted to keep it cheerful. She didn't want them to have a bad memory.
Yeah.
So they spent the quality time, and a lot of people say, you know what, that's more important to the kids anyway, right? Is spending quality time. And it kept them distracted. So they were walking home, and of course, that having been there all day and being kids, they were hungry. They told Ivy, Mom, we're hungry, and she obviously felt despair. She knew that there wasn't anything else to eat at the house or at the apartment, and she had no money to go buy food. But when they started up the stairs, because they were on the 2nd floor of this apartment building, Ivy and the boys were stopped by an elderly woman who came out of the ground floor apartment beneath her. And she told Ivy, she was like, oh, honey, come. I've cooked Thanksgiving dinner for you and the boys. Come with me and eat dinner. And Ivy, she appeared to be living alone, but this was a complete stranger. So although it was a very nice invitation, she was apprehensive and felt uncomfortable, obviously. So at first she politely declined, and she told the woman, thank you, but I don't want to impose on you. But the woman was really insistent, and Ivy ultimately couldn't refuse the invite. And the boys were like, please, Mom, please let us, go in there. When they walked into the apartment, there was a huge spread of food on the table, and the boys were especially excited with all this food. And I've got a video to include where Ivy describes, and she's recounting her first impression when they came into the apartment with this woman.
Yep.
Entering the apartment, Ivy felt immediately at home.
And it was all dimly lit, and the kitchen table was just loaded with food, and she was just so incredibly sweet.
See, we're gonna have to carve the turkey.
Her presence was like electricity. She had a sparkle in her eyes. There was life in her. You know how in the presence of some people you feel so absolutely comfortable? That was what she created that evening for us. Food, yes, lots of it. But for me and the loneliness that I felt, what she gave to me was unconditional love. And it was just one of the most special evenings that I have ever spent in my whole life.
That was so sweet.
You said about the sparkle in the eye. That was something that the mother said, and the Santa had a sparkle in his eye as well. That's bizarre.
Yeah. So they were there maybe like an hour and a half. It was under 2 hours, maybe like an hour and a half. And the elderly woman living there, obviously she was by herself. So she sent all the leftovers home with them. And Ivy recounted that there was enough for weeks, or at least I should say a week. At least, but it was an abundance of food that they had not had, so they were really enjoying it. But Ivy felt that the dinner invitation and the company obviously was so generous that in itself was a miracle, that they had been invited to Thanksgiving dinner by a complete stranger and had this great company and great.
Not met her before then.
Nope.
Was this the first?
That was the first time. But the next day, Ivy decided, I'll take the food out of the containers, put it in my own containers. She washed the woman's containers and was going to return them to her. And she thought it would be nice to talk to her new friend. So that's what she did. She stored the food in her own bowls, washed the woman's containers, and she went to thank her for her overwhelming generosity. And she knocked on the door a few times, but the woman didn't answer. And the window coverings weren't closed completely. So she was able to peek in to see if there was anybody moving about that, she could catch her attention, like, hey, I'm knocking on your door, that kind of thing. But she wasn't at all prepared for what she saw when she looked in there. This apartment was completely empty. This was the very next day. There were no signs of anyone living there. Not only that, there was no furniture.
Oh my God.
So there was no furniture, nothing. So Ivy's like, what?
What happened?
What's going on? You're like, am I at the right apartment? But she knew it was apartment 15. So she went to the manager's apartment and, he answered the door and she asked him like, hey, what happened to the little lady that was living in apartment 15? And he told her that no one's lived in that apartment for about 3 or 4 months. Wow. And yeah. So she was like blown away and she's like, no. Yeah. She's telling the manager, that can't be right. I just had dinner there last night with my boys and I'm returning and he looked at her like she was like, are you okay?
Yeah.
But she insisted she knew what she had saw. So in that moment, she knew it was a true miracle and that she'd had Thanksgiving dinner with an angel.
Wow.
And later on at the age of 57,
containers like a special reminder. Yeah.
At the age of 57, she was doing an interview and she was talking about her encounter with the angel, and she said that in all of her years, that hour and a half was spent with that woman for Thanksgiving meal had changed her life. And the unconditional love and care that she felt, it just touched her so strongly that she made a promise to herself that she was going to do her part to help other single moms and people who were in need. So
Kelly said, "Oh,
Tupperware."
Tupperware, everybody.
It's awesome. So she kept her promise, and in 1989. She founded Angel Network Charities in Hawaii, and it became this $700,000 a year nonprofit that helped homeless families in Hawaii to gain like the means to live independently and to help them get food and transportation and house healthcare and things like that.
That's amazing.
But here's something a little more interesting that I didn't know upon this. Her selfless generosity and her story became the inspiration for the 1994 pilot episode of Touched by an Angel, the TV series that was on CBS. Yeah.
Oh.
Sadly, she did die at the age of 60. She died of intestinal cancer, in April of 2002. But her legacy in the organization still lives on. So
and look at all the people that she's helped because of that an hour and a half.
absolutely. It's become almost like a food pantry where they
paying it forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Pretty amazing indeed. I had
kind
some
of freaky when you're living in like the empty apartment and you're like, I've just been in there. What?
I had a couple pictures to show with that, but they're more like I mean, you can show them, but they're more of a reenactment type. Other than the first picture, there's the first picture of Ivy when she was the young 25-year-old mother. That's her.
Yeah.
And then you saw her in the interview, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
The woman inviting her. So these were just kind of like
knocking on the door when there's nobody in. There's nobody in. There's nobody in.
No, Kelly's that one's gonna stick with me. Holy Tupperware.
Holy Tupperware. Yeah.
Yeah, an empty apartment. No, I mean, can you imagine?
That's a reenactment of the empty apartment.
No furniture, no anything.
No, well, not now because she's passed away.
Yeah, that was about 3 years before she passed away.
Wow. And it inspired her to go on and help so many other people. So, wow.
Yeah.
Holy Tupperware, everybody.
Holy Tupperware.
Holy Tupperware. And I've got one more in our final story. And that's a good one. That's a good one. And there is an actual photo to go with this, which we'll get to later. Right. Now, it is a little bit of a not a nice story, but it ends up being nice. So it ends up being good. So on May the 16th, 1986, and for some reason, both my stories are from 1986, and I have no idea why, but so we're in 1986 again. So May the 16th, 1986 will never be forgotten by the residents of Cookeville, Wyoming. On that Friday afternoon, in their quiet rural town, a deranged couple called David and Doris Young entered the community's elementary school with multiple firearms and an explosive device attached to themselves via a lanyard and took those inside hostage. Yeah, but this episode is not a true crime episode. It's called Guardian Angel, so it's all right. It's all right, everybody. It'll be fine.
Keep it in mind, yeah.
Keep that in mind. It's going to be fine. So 136 students and 18 adults, 15 of which were members of staff. One was a parent, one was applying for a teaching position, and another was a UPS driver who was unfortunate enough to be making a delivery to the school at that particular time. David went into the school office and told the secretary, Christine Cook, "This is a revolution. We are taking this school hostage." Okay, David, okay. Yeah. He forced her to unplug the phone and the principal's phone. Obviously, it's 1986. That's probably the only two phones in the building, I should imagine. He then rounded up the staff in the office and led them down the hallway. Meanwhile, his crazy bitch of a wife, Doris, because they're both crazy. I'm just going to put that out there. They're both a bit crazy. She went to each classroom, luring the students and teachers out of the classrooms, and she claimed as she went on her way to some classes, she'd say that there was an emergency. To others, she would say, "Oh, we've got a surprise for you." And some of them, she said there was an assembly, so she couldn't keep her story straight because she's a crazy bitch.
Say it, Lisa. Just come out and say it.
Well, they're clearly crazy wankers. They've got a bomb. Oh, I said words. I'm supposed to say explosive device because YouTube's not allowing you to say the B word, so I didn't just say that. So, yeah, they've headed everyone in the school into this one small first grade classroom. And it soon became clear to everyone that they were being held hostage by a madman and a mad woman.
Yes.
And I've got a picture of David. I couldn't find a picture of Doris.
What a thing to shout, too. Like, this is a revolution.
This is a revolution. I'm a twat. Yeah. Spoiler alert, he had a manifesto. They've all got manifestos. They've all got manifestos. I couldn't find a picture of Doris, but who the hell cares? Because that's enough of him. Yeah, who cares? That's David, whatever.
He looks a bit deranged.
Yeah, he really does. So David had previously served as the town marshal. So he'd been the only police officer in this town for 6 months in 1979. So that was 7 years previously.
Yeah.
However, he was fired for gross misconduct, probably because he's got some mental problems and he's a bit crazy. But that's just my opinion. Don't come for me. This had begun in David, at least, a resentment against the whole town of Cokeville, and it developed into a full-blown delusion, obviously.
Yeah.
His plan had been years in the making. He'd spent years planning this, and it was spurned on out of revenge. But over the years, it had twisted in his mind into being some sort of revolution. Because, again, crazy.
Strange.
And as I just said, he even had a manifesto. Why have they all got manifestos? Nobody wants to read your manifesto.
Try to make themselves famous and relevant.
Nobody wants to read your bullshit manifesto that you probably copied off somebody else's bullshit. No, stop writing manifestos. Stop it. Anyway, apparently they all need a manifesto, these crazy wankers. Anyway, that's completely irrelevant to the story, but I just thought, oh my God, another manifesto. Right, so it's a scenario that is now chillingly familiar. The innocent lives of children hanging by a thread at the whim of a lunatic, basically. But when David and Doris stormed the school that day in 1986, such horrors were incomprehensible to anybody. To the people of Cokeville, it seemed that only a miracle could save their loved ones. Once everyone was in the classroom, crazy twat is handing out his manifesto. Like, who gives a shit? Really?
He was handing them out?
He was handing them out. Nobody wants to read it, David. Piss off.
Wow.
So he's handing out his manifesto to children and staff. I mean, the kids certainly don't want to read it. And then he began to go on a bizarre rant. He's telling the hostages that they're part of a great revolution. No, they're not. That he had begun many years earlier. He also made it clear that he was prepared to kill himself and everyone in the room. So virtually every child in Cokeville between the ages of 5 and 12 was at the mercy of this crazy twat.
Those poor children. I mean, they had to be incredibly frightened and not handing out what, like homework? Here's my manifesto, children.
Read my manifesto, children. Piss off, David. Right, so there's Cokeville Elementary School. And one of the accounts of one of the students, Melanie Chadwick, who was then 8 years old. At the time, she didn't realise what was happening. She had no idea. Her friend Kevin's older brother told them that they were being held hostage. But at 8 years old, she didn't even know what hostage meant.
Yeah.
She had no idea. Like, what?
What does that mean?
We've got no comprehension of what hostage meant.
Maybe that was better.
Yeah. David told them that they were being good, but he said to them that if any of them tried to escape, he or Doris would have to shoot them in the legs. Fuck you, David.
Wow.
The children. Sorry. So did I just swear? Sorry, but
You probably aren't supposed to say that either, but go ahead.
I don't care. I don't actually care. Twisted evil twat. Anyway, so he's telling these children that he's going to shoot them in the legs if they try to escape. And that made them, obviously, they're not going to try and run away because they're now terrified.
Right.
He said that he didn't want to hurt them, but if they tried to run away, he would. He told the adults, however, that he would kill them if they tried to escape because we have no use for you.
Nice.
We've got no use for you, David, because you're a complete and utter twat.
Twat.
So David next talked to the principal, a man called Max Excel. He told Max that he would be his spokesperson. I'm sure Max was over the moon at being the spokesperson for David. I'm sure he was very, oh my God, me? Really? You picked me?
Pick
Thank
me.
you.
Excuse me.
And that he had a disagreement with the federal government. He probably didn't. Just making shit up. And that they wouldn't listen to him. He said that this was his way to get them to listen. He then said that he wanted $2 million for each hostage, a total of $308 million, because it's a revolution and it's got nothing to do with wanting money or nothing.
That's a pretty precise number.
Yeah. And he wanted an audience with the then president, Ronald Reagan. Now, apparently, this blew my mind. He'd sent his manifesto to Ronald Reagan. I'm sure that he didn't read it either. But, I mean, somebody, if you're sending a bloody manifesto to the president, somebody's going to read it on his staff and be like, wait a minute, crazy wanker.
Maybe we should go check this out.
Somebody could check out David over there because, what? But what? They didn't. Nothing happened. He sent it to Ronald Reagan and they didn't do nothing about it. But I thought that was weird. And he also wanted them to convene Congress so that they could appropriate funds for the ransom because he was going to get $308 million, apparently. Okay, David. Okay.
Yeah, guys, piece of work.
Right. Yeah, and Jeanette says, Lisa, you need a bleep button. No, I don't, Jeanette. No, I don't, because, no.
We like Lisa just the way she is.
Right, so...
I never swear.
Oh, you liar. Liar. She does. I've got outtakes. Just you wait, liar. I've got evidence. Anyway. Continuing. News of this crisis flashed through Cokeville and beyond. It spread like wildfire. The police converged on the scene. Distraught parents confronted the sheriff. Some of them were determined to take matters into their own hands and just go into school and save their children. But David was a veritable human fuse. One little wrong movement could let off the device and destroy the classroom, the school, and everyone in it. So obviously they didn't want anybody storming in. So it was quite tense over in Cokeville. And my mouse isn't working.
Oh, no.
Because that's just what happens, isn't it?
Well, I'm sure you know the story.
I do, but I've wrote it so well. I want to read it.
Okay.
Right, so many of the... it's not working. Many of the people in the classroom believed that... That's the wrong slide. It's moved on twice. See, I'm making a worse mess of this one than I did Jamie's, and that was supposed to be Jamie's one. Right, there we go.
Okay.
Right, at one point, one of the students accidentally bumped into David, which made him really upset and agitated.
He didn't shoot him.
Yeah, no, he didn't shoot him, but it made him agitated because he'd accidentally bumped into him.
Okay.
Because he didn't want the device to go off yet. One of the teachers, a man called Jack Mitchell, suggested that they take the floor up and put a 9-foot square area. I wonder how big this classroom was that they can have a 9-foot no-go zone square. And
I don't know.
Must have been quite a big room.
They had to push chairs or tables out of the way, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, so you've got a 9-foot no-fly zone that nobody's allowed in apart from David. And the whole school in this one. It must have been quite a big classroom.
Yeah.
So they made this and they called it for the children the Magic Square and told them not to go inside it. So that stopped them accidentally bumping into him, whatever. One of the other students, Amy Bagasso, was 10 years old at the time. And she remembers people saying that there was someone outside could shoot him. And that terrified her because she thought she was going to die. Was she going to get shot? Was it going to cause the thing to go off that he was threatening them with? And she was she was wondering, am I going to grow up? Am I going to, the first thought was, am I ever going to be old enough to get my driver's license? Bless her.
It had to be so traumatic for them. I mean, you think about you had to have some PTSD after that.
Yeah. So another person that was in the building that day, Christine, remembers that several of the students were getting ill and they started to throw up because the smell from the device's gasoline fumes. As time went on, the fumes get stronger. They're all in this enclosed little area and they began to feel nauseated. She and some of the other adults, because she was one of the teachers, convinced Doris to open some of the windows to let some air in because it was getting a bit choky in there.
Yeah.
So, with permission, because they had to ask for permission from David, I wouldn't be asking them for nothing. The staff had been preoccupying the children throughout this in the form of movies, books, games, getting art supplies out, singing songs, and prayer. Amy remembers, that's the 10-year-old, Amy remembers that she and the other hostages were praying a lot throughout the whole ordeal. She remembers sitting with her hands clenched tightly and praying to God that something or somebody was going to come and save them.
Mm-hmm.
So, terrifying for these children. And many of the people, not just the children, many of the people that was in that classroom believe that praying coming from inside the classroom, coming from the parents outside, and for people all over the country, and indeed as this spread all over the world, praying for these children, heralded a miracle.
I'm sure it did.
Yeah. First of all, David become agitated. I would say he was probably agitated the whole way through because he's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And he appeared to lose confidence. So I said once again, I'm sorry. I'm talking about David. I can't help it because he's a twat. So moments later, he's losing his confidence. He handed control of the device to Doris, who you might forgot about her, but she's the crazy bitch wife. He handed her control because he needed a way. He needed a way, everybody. So he buggers off to the bathroom, and she's got control of the device. By then, the students had been immobile for nearly 2 hours. They were getting restless, they were getting irritable, and many were distressed, sobbing, crying, especially the younger ones. They just wanted to go home. And they were so terrified. They wanted to go home. They wanted to go and see their family. They wanted their mum. They wanted their dad. And Doris tried to calm them down by telling them to think of it as an adventure movie. Yeah, okay then, Doris. Okay, we'll think of it as an adventure movie. You stupid bitch. Really, and told these children that they would have a great story to tell their grandchildren.
Oh my gosh, seriously?
Piss off, Doris.
What a lovely couple. How do they meet each other?
Plenty of twats, probably.
Wow.
Yeah. Doris clearly has no experience with children, and that's not what you said. I mean, yeah. You have a lovely story. Telling a 5-year-old you're going to have a great story to tell your grandchildren about when I was going to shoot you in the leg. Thanks, Doris. I don't know. She told him not to worry and that David would not hurt them, despite the fact that David's told them multiple times he's going to shoot them if they move. I don't know. She also told some of the staff to help her do something about the noise and to get the students to quiet down, because how dare they cry and be upset when they're getting help?
Probably hungry and have to go to the bathroom themselves. And
yeah, he can go for a wee. They just got to sit and piss themselves. Anyway, eyewitnesses remember that as Doris is getting agitated because the children won't be quiet, she was gesturing carelessly. And the adults especially were like, oh my God, one false move for this crazy bitch. They probably weren't thinking crazy bitch. I'm thinking for them, crazy bitch.
It's going to
trigger a catastrophe. Around 3:40 p.m, while she was gesturing towards the staff to move some of the students, she inadvertently triggered the device, causing an explosion and a fire. Doris.
Please tell me that nobody was hurt but her.
We'll get there. We'll get there, Danielle. Police and paramedics and firefighters immediately stormed into the school to try and contain the fire and save the hostages. 3 of one of the firefighter, bloke called Kevin Walker's children, were among the hostages.
Oh, wow.
When he saw the smoke coming out of the windows, he expected to see the school explode into a million pieces.
Mm-hmm.
A few students stumbled from the smoke within seconds of the blast, escaping either through the open windows, which they'd opened because of the fumes, or through the classroom door. Others were trapped inside, barely able to see because of the dark smoke. After the explosion, now this is completely irrelevant to the story, but I'm going to add it because you probably want to know this bit, and it's great. It's probably the best bit of the story. After the explosion, David returned to the classroom. Now, Doris had been injured in the explosion, and her clothes had caught on fire. David shot her and killed her. So David shoots the wife, and then he also shot and injured a teacher that was running down the hallway, but he didn't kill the teacher, he just injured them. And then he went back to the bathroom and killed himself.
Wow.
Well done, David. Best thing you've done all day. So a grim search of the school began. I thought you'd be interested what happened to them. He shot her, shot himself. If he'd just only done that in the first place and not done any
Why
other
do these people always do this? Why do they always include somebody else in their own mental issues? Just do it yourself. Just be done.
If only they'd just done that, if he just shot Doris and shot himself in the first place and not even went out the house that day, fine. Who cares? Anyway, a grim search of the school began with police and first responders expecting to find multiple victims. However, the only bodies on the scene were that of David and Doris. Miraculously, everyone else survived. Obviously, there were some injuries. Some people had some burns. There was smoke inhalation. Some people had got crushed a bit as they were like running to get out the door.
Yeah.
They got injured while they were escaping. But miraculously, there was nothing life-threatening. One of the teachers obviously had been shot by David, but they survived. It wasn't fatal. Now, I've got another picture. Just to keep up with the pictures, because I
So much for wanting all that money too. I mean, was that his plan?
It's a twat. There is a little bit more to the story, and but I didn't add that in because it wasn't really relevant. But yeah, there's obviously that's either David or Doris because it looks like a body. So that's one of them getting taken out. I don't know which one. Maybe I've actually got a photo of Doris. There you go. There's Doris, everybody. Right.
Doris on the gurney.
So, according to an explosives expert, a man called Richard Haskell, this device should have destroyed the entire classroom and, in fact, the entire wing of the school had it actually functioned the way that it was supposed to. Police later learned during their investigation that David had practiced, basically. He'd built and exploded several identical devices, and one of them he tested on a sealed school bus, and it completely destroyed it. Yet in the classroom, it had experienced some unexpected problems. There was a container of blasting powder that had become thoroughly soaked by a gasoline leak. And as I've said earlier, they were getting sick because of the smell of gasoline that had leaked out. That wasn't the only thing that was wrong with it. There were detonation wires that were going to other tubs of powder that had been cut. And there was no reason and no explanation, but they'd been cut.
Really? Cut?
Haskell says that there should have been 156 people dead in that classroom, but somehow that was not the case. And this picture here, actually, I've added this because it's weird. I think it's weird. Right, look. I found this picture. This is Cookville preschoolers getting their first look at the damaged classroom the week after the bombing. Why? Why would you take them back to the...
Why?
Why would you do that to preschool? What are you doing?
Why would you subject them to that?
They don't need to go and look at the damaged classroom. They're children. What are you doing?
That's almost abusive.
Well, that was weird. It's not just me. That's weird, isn't it?
No, I think that's very weird. Why would you subject them to that? That's the most traumatic thing in their young life.
Traumatized. Don't take them back to the scene.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It is weird.
I just thought that was weird. And I wanted to point that out because it's weird. Why?
And I'm guessing, I mean, their parents probably okayed that. Maybe they thought that.
Is this just
I don't think that'd be a bad idea.
I mean, did they think it was okay? I don't know.
I wouldn't have put my child through that again.
I don't know. Anyway, the whole town was obviously praying for a miracle that day, as was the whole country as it spread across the news. And it appears that they got one. Even more so when the children began to speak of their experience in that classroom. Multiple children claimed that they were guided from the building by a mysterious, glowing presence. Many children described multiple of these presences floating overhead, and one of the children actually said that everybody had one above their head, apart from David. Even Doris had one above her head, but David didn't have one. So
Really?
Everybody had one. Which is like, why has Doris got one? I know that, like we said earlier, that the angels, you've got free will and they can only guide you and whatever. But I mean, why waste an angel on Doris? Just saying.
I guess
But
that's between hers and God.
we might question the Almighty anyway.
Yeah.
So they're all singularly, when they're going home talking to their parents, they've not conferred about this. Like, yeah, I saw these beings. And some of the children actually described that they saw, this is the older children, they actually called them, the younger children just said they saw, like, lights.
Okay.
So the older children said that they saw several angels, they actually described them as angels, encircling the device and Doris and holding hands just before it went off, and that contained the blast.
Wow.
Now,
That's
once
amazing.
the area, this is where it gets weird. Once the area was cleared and the fires are contained and they're like cleaning up the building and whatever, there's more evidence comes forward of this apparent divine intervention. Now, the classroom walls obviously were charred and blackened with smoke because it had been, after the explosion, it was set on fire.
Explosion, yeah. Makes sense.
But in the middle of all this charred walls, there's completely white areas where it appears that something or someone stood and blocked that area for getting soot or whatever on it.
Okay.
And that picture that come from like the police files of the classroom, many people in Cokeville and beyond believe that that is evidence of the guardian angels who came to the school that day and saved the lives of Cokeville's children. And I take it you want to see the picture.
Yeah, show me the picture.
No, I'm not going to show you. Yeah. This is obviously a zoomed out version. You can see it behind the bloke on the wall.
Oh,
but
yeah, in
I've
front
got
of
a
him.
closer.
Wow.
That's from the police photograph. But we'll go in because that one was a bit clearer. It's very strange.
Very strange. But what a miracle indeed.
So many people believe that that is the outline of whomever or whatever contained that blast. But
well, I don't know how anybody can. I mean, obviously there are deniers out there and people without faith. But just in the evidence of the stories that we had today, those are just examples, just small examples, because on a daily basis how many people must encounter angels, or we talk about near misses with our vehicles and things like that. I happen to believe that there are angels out there watching over us and that they do intercede and intervene for sure.
Well, I actually believe in both. I think that there is angels watching over us, but I do not only think, I know that there is your deceased loved ones. I've got a little bit of an interest in keeping an eye. I know this. I'm not going to get into that because I might save that for another episode, but I know this to be fact. It's a fact, everybody.
I know you do.
And I'll save that story for another episode.
So, I don't know. I mean, anyone in our audience ever experienced their own story or own incident of an angel that they knew it just had to be an intervention?
Let us know if you're here watching live. Let us know, and while you do that, I've got a little bit of statistics for you. I'll just read that while you're typing your story really quickly that you got saved by an angel. Hopefully, you didn't have anybody like David or Doris in your situation, but whatever. So, the actual most recent study I could find, there probably is a more recent one, but the only one I could find on a week's notice was a 2008 study in America by Baylor University, which I meant to look up where that was, but I forgot. But, it's in America somewhere.
It's in America. It's a well-known university, but
that narrows it down. I did mean to look up where it is, but it's in America, which has narrowed it down a little bit. Yeah, so they conducted a poll of 1,700 respondents. And in this poll, 55% of those surveyed, the survey says, answered affirmatively to the statement, I was protected from harm by a guardian angel. Now, this goes way beyond 55% of people saying, I believe in guardian angels. They actually believe that they have lived a supernatural experience where a guardian angel has intervened in some way and protected them. So that's 55% of people in 2008. Wow. There's probably a more recent survey somewhere, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
I did find a 2016 United Kingdom study that states that 34% of Britons believed that they had a guardian angel, and 1 in 10 of those believed that they had had contact with their guardian angel. So that's from 2016 in the UK. But yeah, I do think that both exist, and
I think that I mean, I think they both exist, but it is true. We were always taught, that we had these specific guardian angels that were just for us. And now researching and going through the Bible and things like that, that's not necessarily the case biblically. Yes, angels are sent to guide and protect us, but what might be protecting me is protecting somebody else when they're in need as well. So God, they have that charge over us. So again, there's so many times you can think about that. I don't believe in coincidences. I know I might be in a minority, but I think that when things like this happen in the stories that we said today, there's no coincidences there that was meant to happen.
And Tyson says in the comments that he recently nearly got hit by a car and God guided him through the hardest times, and having faith always made him feel at home and safe. So,
awesome. Yeah.
I do think there's a distinct difference, as we went over at the beginning. You've got your guardian angels and your spirit guides. You might want to call it a ghost, a presence of a loved one. I'm going to call it a spirit guide. I think there is evidence out there that both exist and both have intervened in different ways.
Mm-hmm. And Kelly, I agree with Kelly's opinion as well. God himself watches over us and sends angels according to his will. So
yeah,
absolutely. So hopefully,
that's our little Easter, because it's Easter this week, everybody. Right. So we thought we'd do something angel-y. So happy Easter, everybody. Now we've got a little announcement to make.
Happy Resurrection Day coming up, and
I've got a little announcement to make.
All right, go ahead with your announcement.
It's nothing like, oh my God. No, I'm not having a baby. No, don't panic. Right, it's Easter bank holiday weekend this weekend. Also, it's my birthday. Yeah, I'm going to be 12, everybody. 12.
Me too.
1200. And it's my wedding anniversary. So we're supposed to be doing a true crime case next week. However, I don't think, with a bank holiday weekend and birthdays, wedding anniversaries, because Jamie's crazy enough to have married me 13 years ago. That's probably why he's ill, because he's thinking,
no, stop it.
Stop it. Oh my God, it's been 13 years we've been married to that.
I think that's awesome. You guys got married on your birthday.
We got married on my birthday.
And he'll never forget your anniversary.
Well, he better not. When he gets two black eyes instead of one. I wouldn't.
But that's actually on Easter Sunday, right?
Yeah, Easter Sunday.
Okay.
It's my birthday, everybody.
Wonderful. Happy birthday early.
Anyway, as I was, because we're going to be a little bit short on time to get properly put together and do justice to this true crime story by next Tuesday, because all the things that's going on this week. Rather than have a week off, we've all decided, had a discussion about it, that we're going to have some fun next Tuesday. We're going to just do something completely different. We're going to have some fun. We're not going to tell you what it is, but we're going to have a laugh. So we've had a couple of heavy true crime stories anyway, especially the one that we done last week. Which was quite heavy, and the one with Mary, what happened to her a couple of weeks before. So before we go into another true crime, and because we're going to just have some fun next week, so join us next week, and we're going to try and have a laugh. We're just going to do something a little bit different and have some fun, because it's my birthday. It's my birthday on Sunday, and I'm going to do what I want.
It's your party, and you'll try if you want to.
I'll laugh if it's my party, and I'll laugh if I want to.
Yeah.
So
we'll look forward to that.
Same time as normal, but we're just going to have some fun. So we've got no true crime for you. And maybe a little bit of a mystery in some places, but I'm not going to tell you anymore. You just have to wait and see.
Yeah, Bob, let's hope that Jamie's well enough. Speaking of prayers and things like that, little prayers for Jamie. He's in need of some medicine that hasn't gotten to him yet, and really need to pray for him and hope that
it's a little bit twatty. That's all I'm going to say on that. Yeah.
So
thank you very much, Scott Cameron. Thank you very much, everybody, for your continued support, for your birthday wishes that you've just gave me, and hopefully you'll turn up next week to have a little bit of a giggle with us.
And however you spend your holiday weekend and Easter.
Don't eat too much chocolate over the weekend, because I certainly won't.
I actually don't have any plans, but I'm going to look forward to Tuesday back here with you guys and get some laughs.
Yeah. And we went slightly over because we tried to keep it to about 90 minutes because I think people get a bit bored and switch off after 90 minutes. So
I get bored after 90 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
And also, I need a pee. I'm getting old. I need to go to the toilet. So anything over 90 minutes is like my bladder's starting to hurt. So yeah, too much information. I better just go now before I've said too much.
Too much intel. Yeah.
Danielle, take over and say goodbye to everybody.
All right. Well, again, we thank you all for joining us today. A little bit of the lighter side, as we mentioned, but still very pertinent and perfect examples of how angels do intervene. And I'm sure that there are many more out there. We couldn't find them all to get with you today. They would take way too much time. So we will see you all next Tuesday. Don't forget
I love when she says see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
Oh, look, she's changing color, everybody.
She puts me in charge of this stuff.
Danielle's face is like a mood ring. Look at her.
Yeah, Scott, happy anniversary.
Oh, that's such a lovely shade of red, Danielle.
Happy anniversary to you, Scott. Thank you. It's been a great year. Anyway, see you next Tuesday. And don't forget to like and share.
A very white me and a very red Danielle Alves.
Don't forget to like and share, please, and subscribe. And we look forward to being with you guys again.
And that's it.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.